Give us a lowdown. What is the interaction of the brain and the spinal cord and the whole neurology part of this so we can dive in to other subjects afterwards?
I think where we can start as far as what interests chiropractors is how motion is related to the nervous system, and more particular joint motion of the spine, even alignment of the spine when we talk about posture, for example. And there's different ways to consider the interaction between the body or the joints of the body and the brain or the central nervous system. One is to see or to talk about what effect does motion have on the brain and the nervous system. The other is to say, well, what effect does the brain and nervous system have on the muscular system and on the motion of the body? So when we talk about motion of the spine, for example, which is what interests chiropractors, we are trained to locate areas of the body that don't move, right? Particularly of the spine. And our interest in that is neurological. Well, we can say there's two factors. There's a mechanical factor that interests us as far as adhesions that may form from lack of motion, degeneration that may occur from lack of motion. But where it gets really interesting, I think, is the effect on the nervous system and the brain in particular. On the flip side of that, like I was saying, we could talk about, well, if we understand how the brain functions and its impact on the body and on the musculoskeletal system, we can analyze or examine the brain to have better functioning in the body as well. If you see somebody walking down the street towards you and they have an obvious posture of someone who's had a stroke, for example, you're not going to say, gee, I wonder what kind of problem he has in his elbow or in his wrist. You automatically, instinctively say, he has a neurological problem. He has a problem in his brain. So there's two ways to really look at that connection between the brain and the body.
Amazing. So let's battle that whole movement part, because as chiropractor, both of us, we practice in this field, and it is one of the paramounts that we try to make sure that our practice members and their spine are obstruction free and they're moving. So why do we do this? Why do we have to make sure the obstructions are gone? And why do we have to remove so-called the subluxations?
Why we have to do it is, people come to us because of pain, right? That's the number one reason they come to us. And we know that there's an intimate link between lack of movement and what we call nociception. Nociception being the sensation or the transmission of potential harm. So we have receptors in our body that detect the fact that an area is not moving. And of course, that's not a normal scenario. So whenever we have an abnormal movement or a lack of movement in an area, this is a potential threat. This is may cause potential harm to the person. So those signals are transmitted to the nervous system because above all else, the nervous system is there to allow us to survive. It allows us to protect ourselves. So in the case of an area that's not moving and why it may be important to the patient, if we go to the most basic common reason people visit us is for pain relief, we know very simply that if we can return or bring motion back into an area that's not moving, we can reduce that nociception and give a higher probability of pain relief. Now we know that nociception goes far beyond that, because if we're talking about perceived threat or a perceived harm to the body, pain is only one small factor in that whole nociceptive phenomenon. So much before these nociceptive reactions get to the conscious level of the cortex, it actually goes through many other areas of the brain that are actually more involved in protection and in survival than the actual conscious awareness of pain. And this is where it gets interesting with chiropractors who say, well, I'll adjust people sometimes with no pain, and I'll adjust the areas that I have located as being dysfunctional or not moving properly. And even if the person isn't in pain, we still see positive functional outcomes. Their balance is better, they move better, they feel better. So pain is only a small part of that whole nociception that we talk about. The big picture here is that we're removing interferences, if you will, or we're removing areas of the body that can potentially harm the person. And the nervous system can only benefit from that.